Okay, in this video we'll introduce using markers for rendering. These are very specific markers, they're different to normal textures. Firstly, the colour is matched to codes that you can use on Photoshop and on things like that. Secondly, they have three tips. They have a very stubby tip, an in-betweens tip, and then a third lid comes off, and a very small tip for details. These markers are quite expensive, so it's very important whenever you're using them to use the correct type of paper. That paper is bleed-proof paper. What this means is when you draw on it, the ink won't continue to seep and spread into the paper, which means it's more precise, as well as making the markers last a lot longer. Other tools you might like to use include thin black pens or textures for doing details, a white texture for doing highlights, and a lot of the time it's very useful to have some sort of chalk or pencil, something that you can do lightly and then smudge. And you'd like these colours to match the colour of the markers that you have. The last thing that would be useful is to have a way to cut out and to glue your work, because like our sketches, we're going to build everything in pieces and then stick together the best pieces. Okay, the first example we're going to do is of the bottle. And we're going to do this in multiple pieces. We have the background, one section. We have the main body of the bottle, another. We have the lid as a third, and then we have the label. You can get all of these pieces from one sheet of paper, one sheet of bleed-proof paper. Your first step is to have a sketch of your bottle on any other piece of paper, and then you'll put it underneath. I'll use this same shape for mine. And you're going to trace on in pencil as lightly as you can. You should have done the designing for this on your other sheet. You don't want to waste the bleed-proof paper. So the first bit I'm doing is the body of the bottle. Next I'm going to pick my colour that I want the liquid to be. For this one I'll use a medium blue. First step is we want to put an even amount of colour over the bottle. You might like to, if you're using these for the first time, to just practice somewhere in the corner the way that they work. What you'll find is the ink is wet for a while and then dries, and once it does dry you can go back over the top with the same colour to make it darker. You can do this several times before it stops getting darker. If you still require something darker, because it's very much in shadow, you can use something like a grey and go over that edge again. It will give you an even darker shade of your base colour. It's very important to work quickly with these markers to avoid streaks. Some streaks will occur and this gives quite a good artistic effect, but for the most part you want to avoid them. So the first thing I'm going to do with my colour is to go over my bottle. I don't need to worry about keeping within the lines because we're going to cut it out, but I do need to worry about following the contour of the bottle. So just do this very quickly, you want it to be very flowing. Okay, so I have even colour over my bottle. Might be hard to see on the camera, but you should just be able to see your pencil outline. You don't want it to be too obvious, just enough so you can see it as you draw. A little bit of streaking is fine because it's a bottle which has translucent liquid, so there's going to be all sorts of light reflecting around. Next step is to make your sides darker. So follow that contour, it's very important. As soon as that dries, you're ready for the next step, just to make the base darker. Okay, on a real bottle, you'll be able to see through the liquid and you'll get some shadows from the inside of it. You'll see the full rim of where the bottle sits on the ground. You need to add this now, but try and do it very quickly and naturally, a flick. If you do it very slowly and precise, it won't look very natural. So just a quick flick. Little shadow in there. Most bottles have some sort of shape underneath that give them strength and help them grip the surface they're standing on. So you might like to add some very quick and even lines for those. Any bits where your bottle curves back in and you have underhangs, you might like to build up the shadow just a little bit more in those sections, just to add the contour. And we have the base part of our bottle. The next step is to get some white chalk or pencil. What we're going to do is add reflective highlights. On any bottle, the plastic is shiny and you'll have white streaks. So that's what we'll add now. Once again, following the contour of your bottle, just run the texture down in a few places. Using our light principle, anything facing the light, facing up, you can have a little bit more. You can be a little bit random with these too. Doesn't look very natural at the moment, so we're going to smudge them somewhat. Okay, we have what's beginning to look like a shiny bottle. We've got some depth from seeing through to the inside. We've followed our curvature principle where we're dark on the edges fading to light as it comes inwards, and we've got some reflective streaks as well. Okay, your next step is to cut out your bottle. So you're cutting to your pencil line or very close. Being careful not to ruin the rest of the paper because we're still going to use that for our drawing. Okay, we've cut out our bottle, and the next thing to do is to do the lid. The bottle's looking a lot more three-dimensional now that it doesn't have these overlapping colours. To get the right size of the lid, we're going to grab our bottle and put it underneath. That way we can see through and work out the width of the lid and make sure that it's the right size. Just very lightly in pencil. So that is the size of our lid that's going to fit the bottle. We're going to use the shading techniques we looked at previously with the basics, where we have dark on the edges and then light in the middle. Except this time, because it's a white lid, we can't really shade anything in. So we're going to draw the little bumps on the lid of a bottle that give your fingers grip, which is called knurling. We're going to draw these as a series of lines going from dark to light to dark again. So dark on the edges, and then I'm pressing slightly lighter as I come in, and I have my knurling, which makes it look a lot more three-dimensional. Any proper bottle also has an extra ring underneath which you can add on. This ring is the ring that breaks the first time you open it and makes the sound. So add an extra line underneath, and then along it you can draw shapes like this, which makes the sections that break. Slight shadow underneath the main part of the lid. Tiny bit of shading on the edges. I like to use your finger to smudge it a little, just to make it look a bit more natural. And we're ready to cut out. Okay, we have our lid cut out. Just like the bottle, it looks a lot better once the messy outline is removed. And because we trace, we find that it fits really nicely onto the top. The next step is to do an artistic background. Now what you need for this is a colour that contrasts your bottle. Sometimes black or grey is a really good way to do it. I'm going to use red. So on your bleed proof paper, anywhere where there's a gap, fill in a rectangle of streaks. Do it really fast, really natural. Some dark, some light. I might even like to go over with grey. Just to make it a little bit more interesting. The idea of this background is to cut it out and then to place behind the bottle just for artistic effect. You don't have to do this on each rendering, but it's quite a common touch. On our example, we've gone with the blue because it complements the colours in our logo and just makes the bottle stand out a little bit more. So your next step is to cut out a rectangle from where you've just done the shading. Okay, we've cut out our background. One of the advantages of doing it on a separate piece of paper is I can move it around to different points and decide how it looks best, just as if we were working on computer. It gives us flexibility, and it means if we drew it on the same piece of paper and we stuffed it up, we'd have to do the whole thing again. Another advantage is if I decide I want it narrower, I simply get my scissors and chop a bit off the side. It's very quick to make another one if you want to do a different colour or try some different variations. You can lay them all down in front, mix and match, and see which works best for your drawing. The final step in our bottle is to draw the label. Once again, as we have all of the other times, we're going to stick our bottle underneath and then trace the outline so we know it's going to fit. This gives us flexibility. Trying to draw, leave a white space and then draw a label in here is very hard to keep inside the lines, and we might change our mind or stuff it up and have to do the whole thing again. So keeping the separate pieces helps us once again. So get it as close as you can, and remember the top and bottom of the label will have to be round to follow the contour of the bottle. So that might be the shape of my bottle. I can take that off to other paper, trace, work on different designs. As soon as I've got one happy, that's when I would cut it out, and like in our example, stick it over the top and stick all 4 pieces down onto the page and have a finished drawing.